Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, I have to say to the Secretary of State for Scotland, is that all you've got? Yeah. Is that the best you can do? I mean, these are very serious times for Scotland. And I should thank the Right Honourable Member for advanced sight of his statement, but I'm deeply, deeply disappointed by its content. Mr. Speaker, my very quick take on paragraph 24 of the Secretary of State's statement is it's a wholly new interpretation and indeed inversion of the constitutional arrangements. While section 28(7) of the Scotland Act confirms that Westminster retains its unlimited sovereignty, and arguably it can never relinquish that, the Devolution and Settlement provides through the Sewell Convention that the legislative power will not be used if there is a disagreement and the devolved legislators do not give consent. Paragraph 24 effectively turns Sewell on its head and says that if there is disagreement, i.e. no consent on a legislative consent motion, that the UK Government can proceed to legislate. This is an extremely serious development in UK Government thinking that risks the security of the devolution settlement. It also gives lie to the assertion in paragraph 26 that UK Government is legislating in line with the Sewell Convention. By its own admission in paragraph 24, it is doing the opposite. And perhaps the Secretary of State can give us clarity on what is happening here. The Sewell Convention, Mr. Speaker, is clear. The UK Government should not legislate on devolved matters without the consent of the Scottish Parliament. Well, Mr. Speaker, the Scottish Parliament denied that consent, not the Scottish Government, the Scottish Parliament, the Scottish National Party, the Labour Party, the Liberal Democrats and the Greens. We have all said that we do not give consent to what the UK Government is seeking to do. Yet the Secretary of State comes before us today with excuses, attempting to save his own skin, knowing that he has totally shafted Scotland and the people of Scotland. Empty excuses are clearly all he has, having utterly failed in his role as Secretary of State to protect our devolution settlement and to stand up for Scotland, what he should be doing. He promised that Scotland's Parliament would become the most powerful devolved Parliament in the world. Wrong. He promised us in common stages that when the bill came back from the Lords, there would be time to debate Clause 11. Wrong. He told us that there would be a powers bonanza for the Scottish Parliament. Wrong. Even in June 2016, he pledged to protect Scotland's place in the single market. Wrong. Indeed, the Secretary of State for Scotland has downgraded...
Do you find this amusing?
Keep it up, that's good.
Order. The Right Honourable Gentleman must be able to complete his contribution. Yes, really? Yes. So, what was that? Somebody chunted from a sedentary position? Surely not. Well, no, he will be enabled to complete his contribution. Mr. Ian Blackford.
You know, I would simply say to honourable and right honourable members opposite that the UK Government's own analysis has indicated that a hard Brexit is going to damage jobs. And what do we see? What do we see? We see Conservative members of Parliament laughing. Laughing at the hardships that people of Scotland might face. Mr. Speaker, the Secretary of State for Scotland has downgraded devolution, ignored the Scottish Parliament and silenced Scotland when he supported the withdrawal bill, despite our Parliament, his Parliament, rejecting it. Will the Secretary of State now apologise to the people of Scotland for his series of broken promises? The Secretary of State has failed to protect devolution. He has failed to protect the Scottish Parliament. He has failed to protect Scottish interests. Having plunged Scotland into constitutional crisis, will he finally do the right thing? If he has any dignity, if he has any self-respect, resign and do it now.
Yes, Mr. Speaker,
The members mustn't become overexcited. We've got a long way to go. There's a lot still to be done, lots of questions to be asked, lots of debate to be had, lots of fun to be savoured, in a seemly manner, I feel sure. Secretary of State.
Mr. Speaker, after yesterday, I'm not taking any lessons from the right honourable gentleman on dignity. But we do also at least we've had some clarification of what guerrilla tactics are going to be in this Parliament, chanting in line with what the right honourable gentleman says. Now, I actually respect the fact that the right honourable gentleman opposes Brexit. He's perfectly entitled to do that, but he is not entitled, firstly, to ignore the views of over 1 million people in Scotland who voted for Brexit, who the SNP want to airbrush out of history, and he's not entitled to ignore the result of the referendum across the United Kingdom as a whole. And therefore, it is incumbent on this government to deliver Brexit, and that is what we will do. I'm hoping that it wasn't a willful misinterpretation of the Sewell Convention that the right honourable gentleman set out, because the Sewell Convention is not absolute. He set it out as if it was. It is not. As I set out in my statement, the situation is that the government will seek consent unless there are not normal circumstances applying. I think anyone would accept that the UK leaving the EU are not normal circumstances.
Sir Desmond Swain.
Which power is it that he's planning to take away from the Scottish Government and Parliament?
Good question. Yes.
Mr. Speaker, that's an excellent question from my right honourable friend, because I've twice heard the right honourable member for Ross Skye and Loch Arbour say that powers are going to be stripped from the Scottish Parliament. Not one power that the Scottish Parliament currently exercises is going to be stripped, and over 80 new powers and responsibilities are coming to the Scottish Parliament. And yes, I do call that a powers bonanza.
Ian Murray.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I thank the Secretary of State for taking me up on my invite during my point of order yesterday, coming to the House today to give us the statement. And I want to ask him a very serious question to try and take some of the heat out of the bluff and bluster from all sides of the House that are going on this really important issue. The Brexit Secretary in Scotland signed off or agreed with these proposals during meetings, as I understand it, and those were vetoed by the First Minister. That to me suggests that a deal could be done and compromise could be had on both sides. So can the Secretary of State tell the House and do everything in his power to get all sides back round the table and find the distance that they can go between compromise and getting a deal, and do it now?
Thank you. I very much welcome the honourable gentleman's acknowledgement of the statement, and I felt it was the right thing to do, given that the opportunity to have a debate today had been declined by the leader of the SNP following yesterday's stunt. I am still committed to getting agreement, and I very much welcomed over the last few days the intervention of Professor Jim Gallagher, of Gordon Brown, who were, I think, genuinely looking for a settlement. We reached out to Michael Russell to see if he was willing to engage with that process, and I'm afraid the message came back very clearly that the Scottish Government position is as it was the last time we spoke, is as it was a year ago, and that there is no scope for compromise. But I'm always willing to talk, and if there is any prospect of getting agreement with the Scottish Government, then I am open to doing that.
Kirsten Hare.
Yesterday, the only people who were silenced were the people of Perth and North Perthshire, Dundee West, Lanark and Hamilton East, Argyll and Bute and Glasgow Central, because their elected representatives walked out on that opportunity to question the Prime Minister. I've only been here a year, but there are many ways that this privileged role of public office that you can represent your constituents, and it takes place in this chamber and not outside with the TV cameras. Does my right
Order. I did say a moment ago, when there was some chuntering from a sedentary position, that the leader of the Scottish National Party must be heard. The same applies in respect of the Honourable Lady. The Honourable Lady's question must be heard. There must not be an attempt to shout her down. And if there is such an attempt, it will fail. Period. Kirsten Hare.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can my right honourable friend confirm that no matter what the number of hours that the SNP were given to debate, nor how many powers they were indeed given back, the agreement would never be reached, because agreement would damage their crusade towards independence. It's always self-interest, never the interests of Scotland.
Mr. Speaker, what is clear is that you can only reach agreement with people who want to reach an agreement. Now, it is also clear that Nicola Sturgeon, SNP, have a different interpretation of the current constitution than everyone else. But what is also abundantly clear, it was clear from the weekend, it was clear from many of the antics of the SNP group, that actually all they really want to do is replace the existing devolution settlement with independence.
Heat wisher. Mr. Speaker, there was only really one thing we needed to hear from the Secretary of State today, and I say this as somebody who was very fond of the right honourable gentleman, and that was his resignation. He has presided over this crisis with an ineptness rarely demonstrated on something that required a delicate touch and a real negotiating skill, and he's done that with a litany of failed commitments and broken promises. He will be remembered as the Secretary of State who first reversed devolution. Yeah. He has let our Parliament down and he has let democracy down. For goodness sake, man, just go.
Well, that was an uncharacteristically quiet performance from the right honourable gentleman, which I presume was aimed at achieving gravitas. Whether it succeeded, I'll leave others to speculate. What is clear is I have not changed the devolution settlement. The devolution settlement has not changed. The settlement, as achieved in 1998, was very clear in terms of the Sewell Convention, and we are abiding by that convention.